Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to do a page in my traveler's notebook, and like all of my videos this month, I really want to focus on stamps for Stamptember. So today is going to be a little bit stamp heavy, and I've got to say this page does not end up the way I imagined it ending up. I was sort of thinking that I would sit down and do this really simple stamped page, and spoiler alert, that is not how the page ended up turning out. Now, this is the last page that I have to fill in this notebook, but as you can see, both sides of this spread are quite stained through from the previous spreads that I've done front and back. So I'm actually going to end up working on just some spare paper, and I'm going to stick those two pages into my notebook in the end. It is a really easy way to cover up those kind of pages where there's like stamps or mixed media that's gone through the edge of it. But the other thing that's really helpful when you do it this way is it's really easy if you want to create a stamped pattern, because it can be kind of difficult to stamp into a notebook, especially if it's getting sort of onto the fullest side. So you can see what I've done here is I've just trimmed out a piece of regular white paper. This is about 120 GSM. I try not to make it too thick because I'm trying to cut down the bulk, not add too much extra in here, but I just stamp onto there. It's nice and flat. It's easy. If you make a mistake, you can just trim out another piece and start again. It's a really simple tip for stamping or adding stamps into your notebook. Now I'm going to work with the Garden Party collection today, so I have already trimmed out a piece of pattern paper for the right hand side of my spread, and I'm going to use some similar colors. You can see I've picked out 6 similar colors here of ink to create this repeat stamped pattern for the left hand side. Now this is one of my favorite stamp sets. It's super old from Citrus Twist. If they've got anything similar, I'll link it in the description box, but it's called Sarcasm. I think it's Sarcasm Volume 1. I think there might be a Volume 2 available. Like I said, if I can find anything similar, I'll link it in the description for you. But it was just the perfect stamp set. We got a couple of photos after some all-day Zoom meetings. I know we all know the feeling. So this was the perfect stamp set for that. Now you can see, because I've picked out 6 inks, what I'm going to do is create a repeat stamped pattern kind of ombre rainbow. And this is the perfect stamp set for doing that, because all of these sentiments are really narrow and long, and that's what I want, because rather than creating a kind of block of stamps, what I want to do is create a strip of stamps. So I've got a longer block here, and you can see here I've really only done 3 rows of stamps, and I am keeping them in pretty specific rows. I'm just kind of moving them about to make it that there's not such a huge gap when I do the repeat to the side, but that's all I'm going to be doing. I'm only going to be repeating once, either to the left or the right, so I want to make sure that that gap is sort of quite even on both of those sides. Now I have picked out 6 colors. I have very lightly marked my paper in the middle. I'm going to stamp 3 colors at the top and 3 down the bottom. So I'm starting in the middle. I'm going to start with the bottom middle color. Then I'm going to move on and just carry on down the page before going back up the page again. So I've started with 3 kind of tealy green colored inks. So because these are all reasonably similar colors, obviously, until I get to the darker green one, I'm not worrying about cleaning off my stamps in between each time. And the only other thing that I'm doing is making sure that I move where that block of stamps goes. So for instance, you can see there's one stamp on there that's got an outlined square around it, and if you watch that up the page, I'm never stamping it in the same place twice, so I'm moving it each time, and that just depends where that repeat's going to go, and I make sure that there's no kind of column of gaps all the way up the page. Now when I've swapped colors, I've moved on to yellows, and then I've got a very light colored pink and a darker pink. I am making sure to clean those stamps off in between those colors so that I don't get any muddy coloring in here. But it's just a really simple way to get this kind of ombre effect. I've done it before in rainbow order. I've done it in just different shades of gray. It's one of my favorite techniques. I do it all the time. And this is just a really simple way to create your own pattern paper. Now for sure you could add this into your notebook and just leave it as the patterned paper, but I am going to add another actual pattern in here as well, and that's where this page kind of deviates from what I imagined it to be at the start. So this is how you just attach these pages into your notebooks. Use any sort of adhesive. I just make sure that the page is nice and straight on the top and the side, and also you want to make sure that you've trimmed your paper so that there is just the tiniest little gap down the middle, just to make it easier for those pages to fold. If you cover that fold mark, the pages do get a little bit bulky, it gets a little bit hard to open and close, so it's easier just to leave that little bit of space in between. So here's where I changed my mind. I was going to do this nice pale light pink grid, pink of course, and when I flipped it over to put the adhesive on the back, I decided I liked the floral better, so that's what I'm going with. I've added my adhesive onto the grid side, but I'm not going to stick that down just yet because I'm unsure what I'm going to do with the rest of this kind of side of my spread, this page now. Because changing that floral pattern really did kind of put a dent in my plans for this super simple page. So my intention was I was going to use that light pink grid, add my photos there. They're a little bit large for the placement that I want them, so I was going to overlap them a little bit and then just stamp a title and be done with it. But things get a little bit, I guess a little bit more, I was going to say fancy, but it's not really fancy. It's just that I'm using extra patterns and it just looks a little bit fuller than what I had imagined it. Now I've been using this new adhesive, which is the Tombow Mono Dots adhesive, and I've got to say I don't love it. It's not much of an adhesive at all actually, so at the moment you've seen me stick down my photos. That's the only thing I've adhered with that adhesive, and that's because it doesn't stick very well, so I'm using it more like a temporary adhesive at the moment just to stop those pictures slipping back and forth while I work out what I'm going to do with the rest of the page. Now I do know that I do still want to add that stamped title, but I'm kind of running out of places to be able to stamp. And I know that I want to add, it's not a whole lot of journaling, but I at least want to add a couple of lines of journaling. So I don't want to stamp over my stamped pattern, so I am going to have to put it on the right hand side here, and after going through my garden party kind of ephemera, there weren't any pieces that I thought were appropriate for adding all of that, so I'm going to make my own tag. I had a few different tags. None of them were really the right colors or sizes, so I'm just going to make my own. I'm going to use one of my existing tags as a template to trim off the edges and punch that hole. And then I'm going to find a pattern paper just to create that little reinforcing ring as well. I always start by hole punching the center of the ring reinforcer, and then I use a smaller circle punch to create the ring around the outside, because I don't actually have a punch that creates these ring enforcers. I know you can get them, but it's just as easy to make your own. So now I've got my tag. I'm kind of concerned about how large it is and how I'm going to fit everything together, but the first thing I want to do on here is I am going to stamp my title, which is just going to be Pyjamas Please. So I'm using the Bailey alphabet from Citrus Twist. It's one of my favorites. I love these little serif letters. I love that there's a choice between caps and lowercase. There's numbers. It's just a great set. So I'm going to use that one. I decided not to stamp in black ink. I'm just going to use the same, I think it's called Spruce. I think that's the name of the color that I used for the repeat stamping on the left hand side. So it's kind of tying all of those colors in together. Now I really love the way that my title kind of sits within itself. The please just drops down really nicely under the Y and the J of pajamas. But what I should have done is checked how my photos were going to work with this title. So the tag works nicely on its own, but when I'm trying to stack up these two photos, it just doesn't leave me a whole lot of room. So I started by trimming down the tag. I ended up trimming it down a couple of times, which means those little corner cuts aren't as deep as they were before. So I'm just going to recut them. It doesn't really change anything on the tag apart from just making them a little bit deeper, just using another tag again as a template. So I do have a smaller tag, but what I'm going to end up having to do is sort of swap these photos around because I don't actually want to trim off the photos. I got really lucky that that adhesive is not that great. Again, I'm just using it temporarily so that I can shuffle all of these down into place. And then I'm going to use, again, just some double-sided tape to make sure everything does stay stuck down nicely. I've moved those photos down a bit so they're going to overhang the second piece of pattern paper that I added on, that kind of citrony yellow stripe. And I've left a small space underneath my title that I can add those couple of strips of journaling as well. Now, the pattern paper that I used for my reinforcing tag is very similar. I think it's actually the same pattern as my background piece, so I wanted to make sure that you could see that that was a tag, so I've added a little piece of ribbon in there. Again, this is the last page in my notebook, so I'm not super worried about adding ribbon in there. I'm not going to have to try to stamp over top of that in any way, shape, or form. And then I used my typewriter and just typed out my journaling. It's got a little bit of pink ink in there, just a typecast ribbon so that I can get that pink option. Like I said, not a whole lot of journaling, just a tiny little bit. And then that is my right-hand side done. So I'm just going to work out how to kind of embellish this page. And I know it doesn't need a whole lot of embellishment because there's a lot going on here. What I do have is some of those garden party die cut pieces. They're very large. I do have some digitals that I printed myself for another project I've done, and I just keep them all in the same packet so that I've got them there. I'm really loving these the little house sort of motifs in here, and it works perfectly for kind of that working at home theme. But the original die cut from the pack is too large. I didn't love the kind of size of the digital one that I've printed, but then I realized I do still have a sheet of puffy stickers, and there are 3 houses on that puffy stickers sheet, so I'm going to use all 3 of them today. I just wanted to give the one that I'm going to add onto this left hand side here a little bit more of a home to go to, so I've used a couple of those digital printable labels as a wee shelf for a little house, and then I'm going to add the other 2 over here. So one on the right hand side. I wanted to add 3 so desperately, but I just couldn't make it work until I decided to pop that third little house down the bottom. I don't need to add any journaling in here, so I am just going to pop in the date. I'm going to date stamp it in the same color ink that I used in my repeat pattern. I just wanted to stamp that off a couple of times to make sure my stamp was a little bit cleaner, and you can see it's still not perfectly clean, but that is this very stamp heavy layout all done. Hey, if you love stamps like I do, stick around this month. I'm going to attempt to make sure that all of my projects this month are very stamp happy. I would love it if you joined along with me. Thanks for watching today, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. If you want to keep watching, there are a couple more videos on screen. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.